Ever notice how some advice just sticks with you, like something your grandparents might have said, and it feels timeless, even though the world keeps changing?
Mm-hmm.
Well, today we're going deep into a collection of that kind of wisdom. Timeless advice, all thanks to Benjamin Franklin and his Poor Richard's Almanack.
Right, we're taking a deep dive into the Almanac. It's really a fascinating mix of, like, observations, reflections, advice that Franklin put out there for everyone.
Yeah, and for you listening right now,
Yeah.
think of this as like a cheat sheet
Yeah.
for Franklin's greatest hits,
Mhm.
right? We're pulling out the most insightful, practical bits,
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that'll make you go, aha,
Yeah,
so you don't have to read the whole thing yourself.
definitely.
And
Yeah.
there's some serious gold in those old pages. We're here to help you find it.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Franklin's own life is a perfect example of a lot of the things he talks about in the Almanac. Born in 1706, just a regular kid in Boston, son of a candle maker, no silver spoon or anything.
Right, Josiah was his father's name.
But even as a young kid, he was just like obsessed with learning new things.
You can really see it right from the start. Even though he only went to school for a couple of years, he was reading everything he could get his hands on. Like, he loved Pilgrim's Progress, and any chance he got, he was sneaking into libraries, just soaking it all up. He wasn't just reading to pass the time, you know.
Well,
He wanted to learn, he wanted to use that knowledge to do something.
well, yeah, I mean, the guy was apprenticed to his brother James in the printing business when he was just, 12?
Yeah, 12 years old.
Not exactly a glamorous life at that age. Long hours, probably not making much money.
Right.
But his mind was still going a mile a minute. He started secretly writing poems in like little essays and slipping them into his brother's newspaper.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine seeing your work in print for the first time and nobody even knows it's you? That must have been a thrill.
And then, the big reveal. James finds out that the mystery writer is his own brother. Sibling rivalry explodes. Ben ends up leaving Boston and heads down to Philadelphia. It's that classic story of ambition and striking out on your own.
So Philadelphia, that's where things start to get interesting. Gets a job as a printer for a guy named Keimer, starts living with the Reed family, and of course falls head over heels for their daughter, Deborah.
Yeah, Deborah Reed.
But Deborah's mom, very practical woman, she tells them to hold off on getting married
Right.
until Franklin's got some more financial stability. I mean, he was only 18 at the time.
That's right.
But then enters Sir William Keith, governor of Pennsylvania.
Oh, here we go.
Right. He basically promises Franklin to the world, says he'll set him up with his own printing business. So Franklin sets sail for England to buy all the newest equipment, and then, well, you know what happens next.
Yeah, it turns out Governor Keith's promises were pretty empty. Franklin's stuck in England, no money, no prospects. Takes him several years of hard work just to earn enough to come back to America. But what's so impressive is how he didn't let that setback crush him. He just kept going.
Yeah, tough break for sure. And when he finally makes it back home, more bad news. Deborah's married someone else.
Right.
But Franklin, he was 22 at this point, and even though things hadn't gone according to plan, he didn't give up. This determination, this relentless work ethic, it really shines through in Poor Richard's Almanac later on.
Absolutely.
He keeps working in the printing business, goes through some rough partnerships, but finally manages to set up his own successful shop.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, Deborah's husband passes away, and she and Franklin finally do get married.
That's right, they do.
And it's during those early years with Deborah that he gets the idea for his most famous creation. At just 27 years old, Franklin comes up with Poor Richard's Almanac.
And from the very first edition, it's a huge hit. People loved the straightforward, practical advice, the way he expressed it in these memorable sayings.
Right, and each year, it just got more and more popular. His name and his ideas were spreading everywhere.
And the Almanac wasn't just about publishing. It opened doors for him to get involved in public service, and he really thrived in that world.
Yeah, he held all sorts of important positions, constantly pushing for progress and making things better for everyone.
Like at 37, he helps create an academy that later becomes the University of Pennsylvania. He was really passionate about education, especially the kind of education that would actually be useful in people's lives, practical skills.
And don't forget about his scientific side. When everyone in Europe starts buzzing about electricity, Franklin jumps right in. He actually sells his printing business, which, remember, he built from nothing and sold for a small fortune just so he can dedicate all his time to studying this new scientific mystery.
Yeah, his idea that lightning was the same thing as electricity, people didn't believe him at first. But Franklin, he loved to experiment and test things out. So he does the famous kite experiment, proves his theory, and suddenly he's a world-renowned scientist. It makes you wonder, how often do we dismiss ideas that seem a little out there, even though they might be true?
Then things start heating up between the colonies and England. Franklin's right in the middle of it, representing the colonies in England. The Stamp Act comes along, everyone's furious about the new taxes, and Franklin's powerful arguments play a big role in getting it repealed in 1766.
That didn't last long, though. More unpopular laws came from Parliament, like that big tax on tea. That's what led to the Boston Tea Party and the Boston Port Bill, which was basically punishment. If you step back and look at it, it's this pattern of conflict escalating, even when people are trying to find a solution.
Yeah, it felt like things were spinning out of control. The colonies were on edge, and the revolution finally breaks out. At first, Franklin was all about trying to reconcile, keep things peaceful. But as things got worse, he became a strong supporter of independence.
Right.
He's in the First Continental Congress, helps draft the Declaration of Independence. Then he's sent to France to try to get them on our side. And he pulls it off. He secures their support, which was crucial to winning the war. It's amazing how this guy from such a humble background could handle such delicate diplomacy.
Absolutely.
9 years he spends in France, then comes back to America a hero. And even at 77, he keeps serving his country right up until he dies in 1790. 20,000 people showed up at his funeral.
Wow.
That tells you how much respect and admiration he'd earned. His life, it's seen as a huge success. And his guiding principle was simple. Do what you believe is right and trust that things will work out in the end.
That's a pretty good principle to live by.
All right, let's take a breath here and look at what really cemented his legacy. The wisdom he packed into Poor Richard's Almanack. These weren't just random thoughts. They were carefully considered observations from someone who was really paying attention to the world around him.
Exactly. These sayings, these proverbs, they give us a peek into how Franklin saw the world. We're going to see what he had to say about money, about relationships, about being wise.
So let's start with his thoughts on wealth and working hard. That was something he really believed in.
Yeah.
Like he said, all things are easy to industry, all things difficult to sloth. Basically, hard work makes things easier. Laziness makes them harder. Pretty straightforward.
All right, to the point.
And he keeps hammering it home. Diligence is the mother of good luck. He didn't think hard work was just about earning money. He thought it actually created opportunities for success. You didn't just sit around waiting for good luck to find you. You went out and made it happen.
Yeah, you got to put in the work.
And he wasn't just about making money. He was big on managing it carefully, too. Like, beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship.
I mean, that's still so true today. Those little things you spend money on without thinking, they can add up and really hurt your finances. I bet everyone listening can think of a few of those little leaks in their own lives. Oh, absolutely.
And then there's this one. Drive thy business, or it will drive thee.
Yeah.
He's saying, you got to be in charge of your work. Don't let it control you. Take initiative.
Be proactive.
And he connected that to using your time effectively, which is something we're all about on this deep dive. Like he said, employ thy time well if thou meanest to gain leisure. Sounds a bit backwards, but it's true. If you're focused and productive, you actually end up with more free time in the long run.
Makes sense.
No gains without pains was another one of his favorites. Basically, nothing worthwhile comes easy. You got to put in the effort.
Yeah.
And then there's God gives all things to industry. Again, tying hard work to being rewarded.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to something a little more personal. Franklin's insights on human nature and how we get along with each other, or don't. He had some really sharp observations about friends and enemies.
He did.
Like, a father's a treasure, a brother's a comfort, a friend is both. He sums up so perfectly how those relationships are important in different ways, and how friendship offers this unique combination of support and value. It's fascinating how he highlights the different kinds of support we get from our family and from our friends.
Yeah, it's not all the same.
But he was also realistic about those relationships that aren't so genuine. A false friend and a shadow attend only while the sun shines. Ouch.
Yeah.
Some people only stick around when things are good, right? Have you ever had one of those shadow friends?
I think we all have at some point.
And for dealing with conflict, he had this advice. Be at war with your voices, at peace with thy neighbors. He thought it was more important to focus on improving yourself than getting into fights with other people. Your own flaws are the real enemy.
Makes sense.
And for picking your friends, he said, be slow in choosing a friend, slower in changing. Take your time, build real connections, and don't give up on them easily. Real friendship takes time and effort. Now, this is a tricky one. Do good to thy friend to keep him, to thy enemy to gain him. He's almost suggesting that being kind to your enemies can win them over.
It's an interesting strategy.
And then there's this powerful statement about forgiveness. Doing an injury puts you below your enemy. Revenging one makes you with freer. But even with him, forgiving, it sets you above him. He's talking about taking the moral high ground and how letting go of anger can actually be freeing.
I like that.
And this one is so insightful. Love your enemies, for they tell you your faults. It's tough to swallow, but sometimes even our critics can show us our blind spots.
Yeah, they can help us see things we might not want to admit about ourselves.
And finally, he says, the wise man draws more advantage from his enemies than the fool from his friends. It flips things around, suggesting that even negative relationships can teach us valuable lessons if we're willing to learn.
If we're paying attention.
So moving on, Franklin had a lot to say about wisdom and foolishness, and he could be pretty witty about it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, a learned blockhead is a greater blockhead than an ignorant one. He's basically saying that knowledge without understanding is useless, maybe even worse than being ignorant.
Right.
And he highlights the importance of learning from experience with this one. An ounce of wit that is bought is worth a pound that is taught. Sometimes you got to learn things the hard way.
Experience is the best teacher, even if it's a tough teacher.
And he wasn't too optimistic about people taking advice. Fools need advice most, but wise men only are the better for it. He thought that the people who need advice the most are often the least likely to listen. I think we've all seen that happen, right?
More times than I can count.
Another good one is, silence is not always a sign of wisdom, but babbling is ever a mark of folly. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is just shut up.
True.
And he understood that you can't learn everything on your own. Learn the skillful. He that teaches himself hath a fool for his master. Find good mentors. Learn from people who know what they're doing.
Yeah, don't try to reinvent the wheel.
And then there's this interesting one. He's a fool that cannot conceal his wisdom. Sometimes it's better to keep your thoughts to yourself.
Pick your battles.
Now, Franklin was really focused on time and opportunity, which fits perfectly with what we're trying to do here on the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Giving you the most important information in a short amount of time.
Exactly.
One of his most famous sayings is, "Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that's the stuff life is made of." It's a powerful reminder that time is our most valuable resource. But do we really live like we believe that?
That's the question, isn't it?
And then he hits us with a harsh reality. Lost time is never found again. Once it's gone, it's gone.
No do-overs.
He was all about seizing the moment. Have you something to do tomorrow? Do it today. Procrastination. Not in Franklin's world.
Get it done.
And he stressed the importance of acting now. One today is worth 2 tomorrows. What you do today is more certain than what might happen tomorrow.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about self-improvement and building character. Franklin had a lot of wisdom to share about that too.
He did.
He believed in staying active, having a purpose.
Yeah.
Be always ashamed to catch thyself idle. He saw idleness as something to be ashamed of. Always be doing something. Always be striving for something.
Always be growing.
Yeah, and he said, let every new year find you a better man. Constant self-improvement. Never stop trying to be better.
Never settle.
And he knew how important self-control is. He's a governor that governs his passions, and he is a servant that serves them. If you can't control your emotions, they'll control you.
Right.
He encouraged honest self-reflection. Search others for their virtues, thyself for thy vices. Look for the good in others, but focus on fixing your own flaws.
Look inward.
And he said something really powerful about change. Who is strong? He that can conquer his bad habits. Real strength is being able to overcome your weaknesses.
Absolutely.
Now let's look at some of Franklin's thoughts on society. We're not going to take sides here, just present his observations as they are. He had this to say about lawyers. A countryman between 2 lawyers is like a fish between 2 cats. Doesn't sound too good for the regular guy caught in the middle of a legal battle, does it?
Not really.
And then there's this one. A good lawyer, a bad neighbor. Maybe he's suggesting that lawyers can be a bit too aggressive, even when it comes to their personal lives.
Could be.
He also had something to say about the law itself. Laws like to cobwebs, catch small flies, great ones break through before your eyes. He's pointing out that laws aren't always fair or applied equally.
Yeah, some people can get away with more than others.
And about people and power, he said, kings and bears often worry their keepers. Even those in charge can be unpredictable and cause problems.
That's for sure.
And finally, he had this to say about order in society. The magistrate should obey the laws. The people should obey the magistrate. It's about everyone following the rules and respecting authority.
Right.
It's amazing how so many of these sayings from Poor Richard's Almanack still feel relevant today. Think about it. Have you ever let a small expense get out of hand? Or been in a relationship that fell apart as soon as things got tough?
Yeah, we've all been there.
These are the kinds of timeless truths that Franklin understood, and they still resonate because they're about basic human nature and the challenges we all face. It's pretty incredible how his observations from centuries ago still apply to our lives today.
They really do.
Before we wrap up our deep dive into Poor Richard's Almanack, I wanted to point out something interesting about some of the proverbs, the ones marked with a star. Franklin actually wrote those to express two different, sometimes even opposite ideas.
Yeah, it's like he's acknowledging that the world is complicated, that there isn't always one right answer.
Exactly.
Different perspectives can be valid.
Like this one. Content and riches seldom meet together. Riches take thou, contentment I had rather. It's about choosing between wealth and happiness. And he seems to be saying that inner peace is more valuable than material possessions.
Yeah, what's more important?
And then there's this one. Different sects, like different clocks, may be all near the matter, though they don't quite agree. He's encouraging tolerance for different beliefs, saying that even though people might have different approaches, they might be aiming for the same goal.
It's about being open-minded.
It's a really clever technique that makes you think beyond the surface meaning of each saying and consider different interpretations.
It makes you think critically.
So to wrap up our deep dive into Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanack, let's recap the main themes we've explored. We've talked about hard work, careful spending, the ups and downs of relationships, the importance of knowledge and learning, making the most of time, and constantly trying to improve ourselves.
And we've seen how these simple proverbs can give us a deep understanding of Franklin's wisdom, offering insights that are still relevant today.
It's amazing how these sayings, written so long ago, can still make us think and maybe even change how we approach our own lives.
I agree.
So here's a question to leave you with. In our busy modern world, are we paying enough attention to these simple but powerful truths that Franklin shared with us? What Poor Richard wisdom might we be missing out on in our own lives?
It's worth thinking about. Maybe going back to these timeless observations can help us stay grounded in the midst of all the chaos and distractions of modern life.
If you're interested in learning more about Benjamin Franklin and his Poor Richard's Almanack, we encourage you to check out the full text online or read one of the many great biographies about him.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found these nuggets of wisdom as valuable as we did.
And until next time, keep learning and keep growing.